Thank you, Dr. Walensky. Thank you for your service at the CDC, and thank you for clarity on vaccines. It can be very confusing right now. And thank you to Anil, who's who's a reporter at the Globe's sister publication, STAT. So our next session builds on Squeezed. This is a multi-part Globe series that just launched last week, and it's about the shrinking middle class in Massachusetts. Please welcome to the stage one of the reporters on the project, Katie Johnston, from the Money, Power, and Inequality team, and she's going to lead a discussion on this really important series that just launched last week.
Thank you, Shirley. Hello, everyone. I'm Katie, and I work for the Globe, and I'm going to have these fine people go along and introduce themselves before we get started. So, Christian, take it away.
Christian Weller, professor of public policy at UMass Boston, and a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress in Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Howe. I'm the COO and general partner of Flagship Pioneering, a really cool life sciences company here. And recently, I was the Secretary of Economic Development for our state, working for Governor Healy.
Good afternoon, everybody. All right, I see people out there, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ron Dorsey, President and CEO at the Eastern Bank Foundation. It's great to be with you this afternoon.
All right, so as Shirley mentioned, I was part of this team that wrote this series that just published about the middle class. And we were all struck by how difficult it was to get people to talk to us about their situation. These were people who made decent money. They weren't poor by any stretch of the imagination, but they were having trouble making ends meet in the way they wanted to. They weren't comfortable. They felt insecure financially. And there was a lot of guilt and shame around that feeling, even though on paper it seemed like they were doing fine. And we were especially struck by the young people and how they had gone to college, they had a job, everything seemed to be lining up, but they felt their future, they were so uncertain, so worried. And all of them thought they wouldn't be able to buy a house, and that's a huge signifier of the middle class. And so this generational anxiety I just found very fascinating and worrisome. Anyway, so there's a lot to talk about. So let's start off by talking about the big picture. What do you think why do you think the idea of the middle class is so important in America? And we're talking socially, economically, let's get at all of it.
Well, I'm an economist, so I'll start with the economics. I think there is the idea of an American dream, which is sort of rooted in sociology and the aspirational picture here. But from an economics perspective, we need a strong middle class because it helps build a strong economy, an innovative economy. And when we talk middle class, for me, it's not just income, just as Katie just mentioned. It is also about the sense of economic and financial security. And it is not, when we look at surveys, it's not just home ownership. It's also secure retirement, having enough savings to send kids to college, having enough money for an emergency. And those things are where we see the biggest weaknesses. And what that means for the economy is the flip side. People then are not just ashamed, they lack that peace of mind. And they are all of a sudden focused so much on the today and do not take the risks of starting a business, switching careers, on all of the things that we need in a tech-heavy, knowledge economy-heavy state like Massachusetts, but all around the country.
Yeah, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I worked a lot on when I was in the state. So maybe just to give some factoids. So one is, we are very lucky in our state. We've been very successful for a long time. We're the wealthiest state, so highest income per capita in the country, on average. However, the embarrassing thing that we should not be proud of is we are I think the third most unequal in terms of our Gini coefficient. And that is not who Massachusetts is. I think we are a state that values having everybody thrive, and we have talented people across the state with really great, #1 public school system. And so if you look at our economy, we've done very well with very high income jobs, but there are so many companies who need people who may not have college degrees, but are still really talented and have great upside. a lot of those middle-class jobs went to other states because we weren't intentional about keeping them here. So one of the things we focused on under Governor Healy and with our Mass Leads Act, the $4 billion bill, is how do we not just have the headquarters and the research and the companies start here, but as they expand and they build operations, how do we have them stay here and create that whole set of amazing middle-class jobs? And that's one of the things that's exciting about Flagship Pioneering. One example of that is we, of course, created Moderna with the R&D and the science and all the patents. But then you look at Moderna expanding to places like Marlborough and Burlington and Norwood and creating lots of middle-class manufacturing jobs. We need more of that in our state to have a healthy, vibrant economy and also to be true to our values of a place that we all are proud to live in.
So I think I want to come at this kind of exploring the ideological importance of the middle class. So part of this is about the myth that made us, and I'm going to shamelessly hold up this book. I did not write this book. This is a book by Dr. Jeff Fuhrer, and Jeff is a former senior economist at the Boston Fed. He's also on the team at the Eastern Bank Foundation as a fellow in Brookings as well. But part of the point that he makes is that there's a shared story that has shaped the economy, but we always don't tell ourselves the truth about the economy. And so part of the shared story is that you're rewarded for your effort, and there's a noble reward in this meritocracy. The problem is, I think we're living more deeply in the tension of the myth right now. This is not a meritocracy, and rarely has been. The economy has been shaped by exploitation and a whole lot of other things. The advent of the middle class is really an intervention by public policy and at the community level, worker protection, to create something that is really an extension of our idea about American liberty. It's important to protect because of that. But because we're living so deeply in the tension, we need to ask ourselves the question, are we trying to build an economy that lives up to that expression of liberty that we made in creating the New Deal, in creating worker protections and some other things?
Interesting. Well, so let's talk about the Massachusetts miracle, right, at the name of the panel. So there's this period of a major economic growth here in the 70s and 80s that helped the state transition from a manufacturing hub to a center for the knowledge economy. And it supports an increasingly well-to-do class of people. But there's a high bar to get these jobs, and there are fewer of them. And so is part of the problem that we've transitioned to this kind of wealthy, powerful, very exclusive economy?
I'm not sure that the problem is, there are multiple problems. One is the lack of affordable housing, the lack of transportation, and heavy emphasis on college education and less attention to vocational training, to apprenticeships and stuff like that. But the other part really is that we sort of ignored some of the, we've in Massachusetts, we've done really well in building up a social insurance network. But there is more to do in that regard. We are an aging state, not the only one in New England. I think we need to have a conversation about long-term care insurance, for instance. That is sort of becoming a big word. So we've ignored some of the rising costs. While incomes are good, there is this bifurcation that we have lots of high incomes, but we also have lots of people with not such good incomes. At the same time that many of the key costs that middle-class families are facing are rising and rising sharply and are remaining unaddressed. And in terms of industrial development, that doesn't quite fit that.
Yeah, no, I would agree with the professor, with Christian here. And also, I think, Katie, your question is an interesting one. So the alternative to not making the transition would be to have been left behind. And we see states who were manufacturing states and didn't make the transition to a knowledge economy. I don't think that's a good option. So I think we definitely did the right thing by leveraging our wicked smart people and our talent and going where the growth is, investing in life sciences, investing in climate tech, investing in AI and robotics, and investing in financial services and healthcare. So that's definitely the right choice, and it is a Massachusetts miracle. The part that we miss, though, I think, is thinking intentionally about how do we create all kinds of jobs for diverse types of backgrounds to have all people have that path to the middle class. So we need to be much more intentional, and that's where this public-private partnership comes into play.
At the risk of being horribly redundant, because Yvonne just told you everything you need to know. But I will say we need to be very hesitant about the miracle language because it puts it somewhere in the realm of impossibility. But what Yvonne just told you is that this was actually relatively planful to figure out how we transition to a different economy. It also took a bit of a different risk profile as well to say that we want to go in this direction when we start to see the foundation of the economy quivering as well. I would say that right now in Massachusetts, I would compare us more to the Rust Belt of the 1970s. Things are good enough here with eds and meds and life sciences that I think we're trying to hold on to an economy that we know is becoming increasingly fragile, in the same way that Detroit held on to the automotive industry for a very long time when the bottom was kind of coming out. Same way that Pittsburgh held on to steel. But we've got to have a different risk profile to say we're going to journey further and find the leading edge. We do have an opportunity to write a new social contract, as Yvonne said as well, because we can think now about what's the economy that we want to create that sustains everyone, and how do we get there?
Right, so answer that question, right? Like, we've done industry, we've done manufacturing, now the knowledge economy. You know, what comes next? I mean, we've had a lot of talk about AI, and if that's the answer, there's also a lot of problems with that, right? Given how much it's displacing humans. So I just wonder if you guys have thoughts on where we go from here.
Well, if I had the answer, I'd probably be playing the market. But I think the Massachusetts miracle had at least also two lessons. It was successful in many ways, but it also ended abruptly, and there was sort of a sharp downturn that followed in the early 1990s. So it was betting on a number of high-value industries, and many companies went under. And the other part is it was largely a Boston miracle, less so outside of Boston. And the key lessons for me, at least, are we should be betting on a lot of industries and a lot of occupations. AI is not going to replace workers in every industry. I talked earlier, Tehran. We are an aging society. We are living in and that's true for all states, but we are sort of ahead of the curve for many states. So let's invest in that. That means care industries, maybe robots can help in the care system. But also when we do this, let's move out beyond Boston. Let's move beyond Cambridge, to be honest. I teach in Dorchester. Dorchester has often been left behind on this. So I think we need to have a much more equity focus in the way we do. But when it comes to industry and occupations, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let's not just simply say, like, this all has to do Kendall Square and MIT. This has to be the whole state and the whole city.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree with that. And I spend a lot of time in Western Massachusetts in the 413. And we have such awesome universities and such awesome talent. And by the way, great quality of life in all parts of the state. And it's not a very big state. So one of the pushes, again, that we've been working on is how do we get companies to start, but then expand the footprint. And rather than getting on a plane, having to fly somewhere, having time zone differences, you can just drive to, Worcester. It's not that far. Worcester's the number 15 life sciences hub in the country, because Cambridge is number 1, and it's way better to drive an hour to Worcester or less than an hour to Worcester than to get on a plane and fly to North Carolina. And so how do we use the whole footprint of the state, North Shore, South Shore, Western Mass? I think the secret to Massachusetts is that we have some unique competitive advantages that no other states have. One is we have the best and brightest from around the world coming here to study, not just from our state, but around the country and the world. That means we constantly have an infusion of talent and new ideas and innovation. And the other thing is that we are a state that is welcoming, and we innovate. We have a history of innovation, and we work together. I'm still wearing my Team Massachusetts bracelet. This is a new one from Secretary Paley. It's a rainbow color. It's a big innovation here, too, in the bracelet. But we work together, and we innovate, and we invent. That's the secret that we have. And so as new industries evolve, we do have many different shots on goal. So not just lengthening the lead in life sciences, which, by the way, there's still a lot there. We're just in early days of really thinking about how we can really cure disease, but also in other areas like quantum, like AI, like climate tech. And on AI, I'll just say one thing, which is that we talk about ChatGPT and it's like fun to go and look up things, whatever. The real value in AI is going to come when we apply AI to specific problems. Applying AI to hospitals and healthcare, applying AI to education, applying AI to figuring out climate change, applying AI to drug discovery. And that's where we can lead, because we already lead in those industries. And the thing that I think is so exciting about AI is that it's a democratizer. So before you had to go to medical school to get information. Now if you have someone who has a good education but maybe didn't go to college or didn't go to medical school, AI becomes a tool that is an equalizer, that helps people get more access to jobs. And so I think we need to be, we at Flagship, my boss Newbar talks about really paranoid optimism. So we have to be paranoid all the time. We're living in competitive environments. We don't want to be like the Rust Belt. There are certainly dangers to AI, but I am very optimistic, and I would bet on Team Massachusetts any day.
So I do think what's next is still having to have this conversation about what's the relationship between people and capital going forward, especially in an economy that doesn't need as many people to be productive and to grow profit. So if that's the case, this can't simply be about a transaction for your effort and rewarding that with money. This has to be about what you're contributing to society, what you're contributing to your community, and valuing that as the economy grows. We're going to have to figure out some other ways to support people as well. I think we're going to have to think about the journey being very different for career workers. Careers will be nomadic, fragmented, multi-skilled, and a number of other things. We're going to need to catch up to all that workers need to do that. So sometimes we're going to have to reward them even when they're on the bench and reskilling and upskilling. We're going to have to give them commensurate reward when they're back in the labor force. So there's a lot of ways that we need to think about this as more than just a simple transaction between the time that you give and what we think that time is worth.
Mm-hmm. And there are some proposed solutions in Massachusetts to build long-term wealth, including some state-level policies such as baby bonds, child tax credits, savings incentives. Are these kinds of programs feasible, given the budget concerns?
Feasible, certainly, if we have the political will. I mean, we had the political will in Massachusetts to pass the millionaire tax, and it has paid off well, and we can use those kinds of progressive taxes to invest in communities. Well, I sort of laid out what people see as middle class, home ownership and retirement. It doesn't actually require that much money to give people peace of mind. Right now, the median Black or Hispanic family has about $1,000 in savings, whereas for the white family, it's $17,000. But we don't need even to get to $17,000. Like an extra $1,000, extra $2,000 in savings does create that financial security. In the past, we said $300 or $400 because that's how much money it takes to repair a car. Given what has happened with car prices and repairs, we probably need $1,000 or $2,000. But that's something that a state can do in terms of baby bonds, in terms of extra child tax credits and other savings mechanisms.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. One is that, so we are living in very challenging times, and we are not getting a lot of help from our federal government right now, and budgets are tighter. However, when I was in state government, I spent a lot of time with my counterparts in other states. We are the envy of every other state. So many states have much more challenging budgets. So many states have borrowed so much money and have huge debt payments. We are living in a state that has a very strong balance sheet. We have a big rainy day fund, we have a very balanced budget, and we are very fiscally prudent. We've had no governors go to jail. Like, this is a good thing. So we are living, relatively in a very strong position, and we still do a lot. And I don't think, one thing I think we're not good at in Massachusetts, we're wicked smart, we're very good at complaining and criticizing and critiquing. We're not good at giving ourselves credit. So for example, during the pandemic, every state gave out child care subsidies and tax credits. After the pandemic, there is now only one state that is still funding child care support and tax credits, and it's Massachusetts. So now, of course, it's not enough. We need to do more, but we still are doing so many things that are consistent with our values and way more than other states. So I think it is going to be tough, But also, this is again a chance, when things get hard, that's a challenge for us to innovate. How can we rethink our budget? How can we be smarter and faster and leaner and more efficient? That's what we should be doing in this time right now, so we can continue to find ways to fund the things that we really care about. And as you know, the governor cares a lot about affordability, competitiveness, and equity. And affordability is high on the agenda around housing, transportation, childcare, all of these really important areas.
So feasible, yes, absolutely. But I think going forward, these kinds of vehicles and public goods in general will be public-private partnerships. I think when we think about this, we think about it being 100% subsidized through public dollars. I'm not sure that's the near-term path for a lot of what we want to deliver. Let me give a quick example in early childcare. So we have seen a historic growth in the early childhood budget in the state of Massachusetts. 5 years ago, we're talking about $750 million, and we've doubled that in the budget, really fortified the sector. But if we think about the access to high-quality, affordable early childhood for every family, part of what it's going to take is employers saying that this is also a part of our benefits packages. The state may need to cover the folks who can least afford to pay for that access, but employers may have to say, we'll take care of the folks who work for us to make sure that they have access to this too. So I think we're going to have to figure out the blending of that capital.
Can I just add one thing? I think Ron makes a really important point. This is about everybody working together. State government, city government, employers. It's also about all of us. Because if you look at part of the reason why we are where we are, it's because we have been successful, but also we've all made choices in all of our 351 towns and cities. So for example, when I got into my office and it's like, oh, we're missing a couple 100,000 housing units. And that's why housing is so expensive. No one can afford to buy a house. I was like, that's so weird. I'm an economist too. Like, shouldn't supply just meet demand? Well, it turns out in 351 towns and cities, there's a town zoning board. And every time you want to build affordable housing or build a condo unit or market rate housing, if that zoning board for many, many years, decades, multiple administrations, if that zoning board in 351 towns and cities for many, many years says, no, we don't want that. We don't want new housing because that'll make our housing less worthwhile. That'll bring traffic. Our schools are going to get crowded. Like, who's going to move in? If you make that decision again and again and again, we end up where we are now, where none of our kids can afford to live here. So all of us have to play a part. And the same thing too with thinking about where you live. So we have so much to be proud of in Massachusetts. This is a very special place. And right now in this country, the state you live in matters a lot. All of us have choice. And so some people say, well, this place has so many problems, transportation and taxes. I'm going to move to New Hampshire. I'm going to move to Florida. Well, when you do that, you're making a choice to go somewhere that doesn't support the values that we believe in. So the thing I ask everyone is to think about what we can all do together to talk about why we're proud to be on Team Massachusetts, why we're proud to do the work here to make this the most awesome place on earth that is affordable, that is more equitable, that has awesome jobs for everybody, and that does have a strong middle class. But we all play a role to do that together.
A couple questions from the audience about college graduates. And everyone's been told get a college degree, but there's a lot of problems with finding jobs right now. I think the unemployment rate among new college grads in their early 20s is like 9%, the highest it's been in like 5 years. So I'm just wondering if you guys have any words of wisdom for people just getting out of college and how they can achieve the American dream.
I wish there was an easy answer, and I have had these personal conversations. I think part of it is to help work with colleges, work with advisors. We as faculty members have to think differently about the challenges that Ron and Yvonne laid out. Not just simply like, here's your degree, good luck, but also like, okay, let's help figure out your skills. If you're a political scientist, where can that be applied? If you had the dream of being a journalist, maybe that's not going to come to fruition, but there's other pathways. And I think for us, at least on the higher ed side, this comes back to us. We do have to take more responsibility in training our students, but also making the connections to employers in our communities. And I think that's sort of the last point I would want to make. A lot of its emphasis has to be on community. Where we are, where we located, the connections we have in our community, however we define that, in leveraging these connections to help others.
I always tell people to go where the growth is. So we're in a bump right now, and it does seem challenging, and we do have, kind of crazy times in the federal government, but long term, go where the growth is. You know that we have to solve problems around curing disease. People are sick and they want to be cured. Invest in life sciences. We know that existential threat to our existence and humanity is climate change. Go invest in learning more about that. We know AI is, very early. Go invest in learning about AI. But if you go where the growth is, there are going to be job opportunities long term for, for folks who are talented and who are investing in themselves.
I think it's the case that in the future, college degrees are not terminal points. They're kind of the next point. You're always going to have to reskill and come back. And in a skills-based economy, experience is going to be critical. It's why organizations like Benjamin Franklin Cummings Institute of Technology, I think, is at the cutting edge of thinking about how do we prepare people by giving them capability. What are the powerful things that you can do with what you know? That's what it comes down to. But our path to that is going to differ. Some of us will have to go into the work world for a while and then come back to the academic world and move in some other places. I think what I want us to think about going forward is that college is also not the sum total of post-secondary experience any longer. There are going to be many pathways. We need to open them up to young people, explore all of them, but lifelong learning and lifelong skill development will be requisite going forward.
Excellent point. Well, I think we've pretty much solved the middle class problem, so thank you all very much. Appreciate all your comments.
Thank you so much, Katie.